All right. We're back. Season 6. Here we go. Savannah, how you doing?
Doing good. I've got a different background. We're still trying to sort out the lighting situation, so come back next week and see if I look any better.
Yeah, I've invested in like a new bookcase and put some like fun stuff up behind me now. So I might rearrange, but like it's a real investment of effort to move this desk. So I think this is what we got so far. This is it. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Yeah, good. I'm ready to get into this season. I'm quite excited. It feels like we've had a nice long break. We've had Christmas off. We've had most of January off. We've done, I mean, I know Savannah and I have done a lot over the last couple of months. We've like, she's been to visit me. I've been to visit America. We've been all over the place. So it's been a busy couple of weeks. So glad to be back streaming.
Had our
All
offsite
right.
last week too.
Yeah, we had our offsite, which was really good fun. Seeing everyone in person. Classic. We didn't get this here, but like Optic Swag came from one of the offsites I'm sure. So we love the swag. Brilliant. All right, let's get into the show. So, welcome everyone to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend at AWS. My name is Stephanie Gooch, and I'm a senior commercial architect at AWS. Savannah?
My name is Savannah Jensen. I am a I'm not a senior commercial architect.
You
Absolutely
should
not.
be.
I'm a senior customer enablement specialist at AWS supporting telco, and I am clearly firing on all cylinders this morning.
Nice and early in Seattle, so she's loving it. She's ready. And so today we're going to be talking about all about migrations. But before we do, just a reminder: if you're watching us live, that's great. Feel free to comment, add questions in the chat as we go. We're here to support you in any way we can. Or if you're watching online on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments if you enjoy this and if you want us to talk about something similar, or if there's another topic that you would like us to cover. Okay, with that, Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself and give us your 1 minute origin story?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Bloom, and I'm a senior commercial architect on the AWS Optics team in the Strategic Accounts Group. I've worked at AWS for a little over 4 years now, and I'm based out of Nashville, Tennessee. I actually left AWS for a couple months last year, but I boomeranged back very quickly. But prior to joining AWS, I was working for a company called HomeAway, now called VRBO. It's part of Expedia. And there I was forecasting and modeling our IT spend. And I ended up growing into a cloud cost analyst role. I don't think the term FinOps had been coined yet, so I suppose that makes me a grizzled vet in this space. But thanks for having me on the show today.
Pleasure. And we are so glad that you came back to us. Definitely for sure.
Awesome.
Good to be back.
So I know we're talking about migrations today. I feel like a lot of people, especially when you're first starting out at AWS, have a lot of kind of scary perceptions of what a migration takes. So hopefully we're going to bust a couple of those myths today and make it a little bit more accessible for everybody.
Yeah, before I get started too far into it, I want to go over just a couple terms, and then I'll start talking a little bit more about the benefits of migrating to AWS. So first, what is TCO? It's total cost of ownership. It's what it involves calculating the costs required to host, run, integrate, secure, and manage workloads in the cloud over their lifetime and comparing it back to an on-prem data center. A TCO will include costs associated with the underlying infrastructure like compute and storage. It also includes the cost of supporting cloud services ranging from security and management tools to data analytics, labor costs, and energy usage as well. And then also with lift and shift. So the lift and shifting is an approach, one among many, for migrating your apps to the cloud. Basically means you're moving an application and its associated data to the cloud without redesigning the app. You just run it how it's always been ran. But to get to more of the focus of today, the typical focus in initial migrations to the cloud usually focus around cost savings alone. But migrating on-prem infrastructure to AWS actually achieves quantifiable business value in the areas of cost savings, staff productivity, operational resilience, and business agility. So just a quick overview of each of those. Cost savings is infrastructure cost savings from moving to the cloud. Staff productivity is efficiency improvements on a task-by-task basis. Operational resilience is the benefit of improving SLAs and reducing unplanned outages. And business agility is developing new features and applications faster and reducing errors. So by migrating their IT infrastructure to the cloud, customers see the true value of the cloud being an innovation catalyst. So where am I going with this, right? There's a cross section here between business value and cloud financial management. AWS commissioned 451 Research to survey 500 US based enterprise decision makers with their experiences with cloud financial management. To no surprise, the study found that customers who implement CFM have reduced unit costs, and these cost savings increased for customers who have been using AWS for a longer period of time, increasing from 51% to 61% for customers using AWS for only 2 years versus 5+ years.
So
what's even more interesting, go ahead.
Can I stop you for a second? So I know we talk about unit cost quite a bit, and I think internally we're all pretty familiar with like what goes into TCO, but as somebody who's kind of been at this for a while, I know it's kind of hard to get people to look at the entire picture and not just focus on kind of, okay, which resources are we spinning up in the cloud? And then beyond that, thinking about unit cost is also kind of like its whole own project sometimes, to try to wrap your brain around that and figure out how to calculate that for your organization. What have you seen in your experience that's worked well? And has there been any kind of like catalyst or trigger moment when you're talking to a customer that kind of shifts their perspective into more like cloud focused, this isn't the only benefit kind of piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, I think quantifying some of those other non-cost benefits is really important. So in using some of the tooling, which we'll touch on a little bit later, and trying to go through and actually put a number to some of those, whether it be the customer's actual data or whether it be some benchmark data. Like AWS has tons of benchmarking data to say, these are the different metrics that matter in terms of moving to the cloud. Like if it's staff productivity, there's an increase in the number of servers that you can manage. If it's business agility, you can move X% faster if you move to the cloud. So I think it's really just actually putting quantifiable data behind it and not just kind of waving your hand and say, whoa, cloud is better, right? Everything is magical in the public cloud, right?
The magic.
So AWS is the best.
Yeah.
Then it's actually putting some quantifiable data behind that is what I would say.
Would you say that a lot of organizations are already measuring some of these things in an on-prem world? Because in my experience, I've kind of seen a little bit of both. Like business agility isn't necessarily something that everybody thinks about, but if you kind of double click on some of the metrics that you have, you can kind of start to pull out a little bit of that. What have you seen there? And Steph, jump in here if you've seen anything too.
I think that at least from what I've seen, customers usually have a decent idea of what that looks like on-prem. But I think that the big difference, at least for who I've worked with, is it's just much more difficult to actually get that level of data out of an on-prem data center that you get out of AWS. Like in the AWS cost and usage report and all of the different metrics and all the different services we have, you can double click, triple click as far down into the nitty gritty of the data as you want. Whereas a lot of times when I'm having TCO conversations and I'm having migration conversations with customers and I say, what does this look like on-prem? And they'll kick over a file to me and I'll say, well, you're missing this, right? Where's your server utilization data? I'm not seeing disk metrics. I'm not seeing network. I can't make a good TCO without having as much data as I can on both sides. So typically that's what I've seen. And I think that it's just more or less about trying to get the best data that you can. And AWS has some tools, right? Like Migration Evaluator that we'll touch on a little bit later that can help pull some of those data points out. But without having a good starting point with those data points in your on-prem data center, it can make it really tough to try and quantify anything really, cost savings versus business agility or at all.
Yeah. It's interesting. I always say I was kind of born in the cloud. I've never worked on-prem. I never had to do it. We had something at KPMG that was on-prem, but I didn't really get involved with it. It was something separate. And so when I came to AWS, as customers were kind of starting to talk about that, I'm like, oh, I kind of deal with just in the cloud. And I know that what it's like if someone's migrated to be, like you just said, Jeff, it's like they do this lift and shift thing. And then they're like, oh, we're spending quite a lot more money than we thought. And we're like, well, you need to use the elasticity of the cloud. And we educate people a lot on that. And we're doing it more and more. And someone's commented in the chat, with on-prem, when you need to expand your compute capacity, you need to hire staff, procure hardware, install equipment. But with the cloud, the second comment, you just click a few buttons, which is very true, which is very powerful. We're moving the kind of purchasing model from procurement and finance to developers, which is a really powerful thing. It's also sometimes quite a scary thing because that's not what their jobs are. So that's where a lot of what we do comes in. But yeah, Jeff, what were you saying? Did you wanted to show another slide, didn't you? That you wanted to show some data on?
Yeah, the other thing that I was going to touch on really fast is when you look at the different pieces of what makes the cloud, such a game changer, the business agility piece is actually the leading benefit in moving to the cloud. So from the 2018 IDC study, most of the business value of moving to the cloud is not financial. Over 90% of the value is non-cost related. And you can see the percentages and how it breaks out there, but 47% is the business agility benefit. And you can start to see the big picture here. So the move to the cloud is more than just like a technical challenge. It's a fundamental organizational transformation, which the viewer had mentioned, installing hardware, you need to rack and stack servers, to this new operating model is something that you have to shift and be more of a cost aware culture and move into like a true FinOps organization. But you can sort of start to see like a flywheel develop whenever customers have a cost reduction in moving to the cloud. Those savings can be used to further innovate for their company, and you move more apps to AWS. And you build a CFM program post-migration, you see more savings, you see an increase in revenue, you see an increase in profit, and then you continue to migrate more apps, and you continue to evolve your CFM program, and you continue to reap both the financial and the non-financial benefits of moving to the cloud.
Yeah. And just in the chat, there's some really great comments as well. People kind of supporting for cloud. So indeed, runaway costs is the main madness for on-prem to cloud. But also coming from on-prem, there was also a delay in procuring when servers used to get shipped for being in the cloud versus cloud is a click of the button. So people in those comments seem to be enjoying cloud, is what I'm getting. But what I was going to say to lead us on to our next thing was you've mentioned a couple of tools. Everyone loves a tool. What kind of stuff would you suggest to people watching today who are on-prem and they want to move to the cloud? How would you get them started?
There are a few tools at your disposal if you want to begin your migration journey. I'll go over a few of them. The first one's Migration Evaluator. So as you plan your future cloud usage, you might be required to build some of these business cases on your own, which can be a daunting task. It can be a time-consuming process, and it doesn't always identify the most cost-effective deployment and purchasing options. Well, Migration Evaluator quickly provides a business case to make sound AWS planning and migration decisions. Your organization gets access to AWS expertise, visibility into the costs associated with multiple migration strategies, leveraging different types of commitment-based purchasing options, right-sized resources, and insights on how reusing existing software licensing can reduce your costs further. It's used at the very beginning of a migration journey. It doesn't require any agent to be installed on your servers. It doesn't look at processes running on your servers, and it doesn't review any of your data. So with Migration Evaluator, you'll receive a summary report and access to the viewer to run additional cost modeling scenarios. The business summary reports include an on-prem estimate and 2 future state cost modeling scenarios. That's the first one. The second one is Application Discovery Service. So Application Discovery Service collects server host names, IP addresses, MAC addresses, as well as resource allocation and utilization details of key resources, including CPU, network, memory, and disk. The information can then be used to size AWS resources when you migrate. So that's, again, an agentless option. It does have an agent if you want to install it to record inbound and outbound network activity for each server. We'll help capture some of those server dependencies. And then you can include the data in Amazon Athena, and you can start running predefined queries to analyze the same system performance for each server, the types of processes that are running on them, and the network dependencies between each of those different servers.
Cool.
This might be like a 101 thing, but the other big one that I feel like is maybe more accessible to everybody in an organization, if you're kind of just a developer and somebody says, hey, we're moving to cloud, let's get it going. Pricing calculator is really helpful. And I think the tools that you shared are definitely to scale out like the entire migration and to understand what that's going to look like, but on a smaller scale, and this could be applicable even if you're migrating like something tiny from on-prem to AWS, pricing calculator is really great and lets you kind of walk through a couple scenarios and really kind of twist the dials a little bit when you put the inputs in.
Yeah, I think this thing gets not used enough and not spoken about enough sometimes, especially when people are like newer to the cloud and they're having to come up with a budget, and sometimes people just like pluck a number out the air. I'm not saying everyone does this, but at least have an educated decision with it. The other thing I would call out is often people, when they do the pricing calculator, will look at S3, RDS, EC2, EBS, like the main things, but they forget about things like disk transfer, CloudWatch. So always remember, if you are doing a price out, that there's all that kind of monitoring and observation stuff that you probably have that you might not remember at the start. So even if that's like you are going to use it, you don't want to use pricing calculator to find it, make sure that you like check your bill after like the first month. Or if you listen to what Savannah says on John Mayer's podcast the other day, she talks about how setting a budget as soon as possible so that you can kind of track over time to make sure nothing goes awry, and just for the worst case scenario, so make sure you have that budget set up. And I'll put that in the show notes, the link to her episode as well. But Jeff, was there one more you wanted to cover?
Yeah, I should probably also talk about AWS's Migration Acceleration Program, which is MAP. It's a comprehensive and proven cloud migration program based on AWS's experience migrating thousands of enterprise customers to the cloud. So enterprise migrations can be complex and can, like we've talked about, they can be time consuming, but the MAP program can help you accelerate your cloud migration and modernization journey with an outcome-driven methodology. So MAP provides tools that reduce costs and automate and accelerate execution. And it breaks it down into 3 different phases. There's assess, there's mobilize, and then there's migrate and modernize. So step 1 is to assess your readiness. The migration readiness assessment helps you identify gaps along the 6 dimensions of the cloud adoption framework, which is business, process, people, platform, operations, and security. The assessment enables you to identify the capabilities required in the migration and build that TCO model for your migration project. Step 2 is mobilize your resources. So the mobilize phase helps you build an operational foundation for your migration with the goal of fixing the capability gaps identified in the assessment phase. The mobilize phase accelerates your migration decisions by providing clear guidance on migration plans that improve the success of your migration. And finally, step 3 is migrate and modernize. So there's AWS migration services, there's AWS professional services, there's AWS migration partners, and everybody's here to help you execute those large-scale migration plans developed during the mobilize phase.
So one thing that I don't think MAP gets enough like credit for, not necessarily credit, but everybody's very focused on the migration part of MAP, but the MAP program really does instill a lot of good practices into your organization and like you as a cloud financial manager as you're migrating to the cloud. They make sure that you have the CUR set up. They teach you how to tag. There are a lot of those kind of further along the line cost levers that you'll be used to because of the MAP program, and you'll definitely be set up for success. You'll have all that tooling enabled. So it's really great. And kind of all those extras are kind of just the little cherry on top of actually going through the migration process as well, for sure. So.
But someone's asked questions, but does it teach you not to leave your S3 bucket policy accessible? We've also had a question which might be covered by one of the tools, so you guys can answer. Do you have any cost for assessment of migration readiness?
I think that falls into that migration readiness assessment from the MAP program. Mm-hmm. Is he asking that? Is there any cost for it?
Yes. Oh wait. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm actually not sure if that's free or if that's paid. I'll have to double check that.
I'll have a look on the link. We'll put it in the show notes if we don't. Also, I didn't say, I forgot to mention at the start, if any questions you didn't get answered here and you want to follow up with, email us at costoptimization@amazon.com. Savannah, yeah?
Costoptimization@amazon.com.
That's the email address.
I forgot it recently, and I thought I made a joke that Steph was going to crucify me, and here she is.
Yeah, live on air. Yes. Here we go. Someone's replied with us already. So Migration Evaluator is a complementary service to create data-driven assessments and business cases for AWS cloud planning and migrations. There you go.
Doing the work for me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, our consistent viewers. Okay, so we've got 10 minutes. So we wanted to cover a little bit on what does good look like. And so we were all going to come forward and kind of suggest an item that you would recommend for someone who's starting out to migrate? So if they've just migrated to the cloud, what is one thing that you really want to emphasize for them to do, to install, to set up? Jeff, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. One of the first things I would do is to look and make sure that there's an internal owner of the CFM journey who can help align stakeholders and drive organizational partnership to align on KPIs that matter for your business. So consider like a hypothetical scenario where someone raises a red flag regarding like a 10% year-over-year increase in AWS spend. Well, what kind of insight would you be able to get from that statement besides the fact that AWS costs have gone up by 10%? But consider if the same person had said that in addition to the 10% increase in spend, your searches went up by 50% and your reservations went up by 30%. Would you consider that 10% like a cost, or would you consider it more of an investment? You really need everybody to be on the same page and speaking the same language, especially as it relates to KPIs. And I think that brings up another good point around like value-based KPIs. They're important because they add meaning to otherwise solitary AWS cost and usage metrics. So value-based KPIs tie cost and usage metrics to business value drivers and help rationalize changes in AWS spend. So the first step in deriving value-based KPIs is working together across your organization to select and agree upon a standard set of KPIs. And a good starting point is just start with some more of the more basic cost and usage metrics like total EC2 hours, daily AWS run rate, et cetera. And then tie in some of those business drivers that matter to your business, searches, bookings, reservations, et cetera. There you can get data like AWS cost per search, you can get cost per booking, or you can shift over and you can do more of the business agility KPIs, which is more like average time to market for new application features or average frequency of production releases for your app.
Yeah, definitely adding in the business ones, like you were just saying. I think we touched on this a couple of times on the show, but if you hadn't have done that, I would have asked you for some examples. So I think they're really powerful because especially when you have this idea of developers in the cloud and like what people do, if you have this kind of cost thing over here and then what's happening at the end separate, it's really hard to understand where you're doing well and where you could improve. And having an exact like, okay, this is per something that the business cares about is so much more tangible than like some box in the cloud that no one sees and no one can touch. So yeah.
$1 per running hour. What does it mean?
What does it mean? No one knows. But yeah, I like that. That's definitely a good kind of KPI thing. And I can't believe I would almost have an episode where I didn't mention the cloud intelligence dashboards to use those KPI dashboards.
I was gonna.
You could go into it, Zaf. You can go into it.
Yeah, I was going to say in terms of like base things that you need or things that I'd recommend, have some sort of cost transparency tool, whether that's Cost Explorer, something that you've kind of made yourself, or the Cloud Intelligence Dashboard Framework, which is something that you can get out of the well-architected labs. We've got kind of a quick deploy. There's a ton of content on our YouTube channel about it. And definitely take a peek at what that looks like. There's some kind of mock-ups that you can play around in to see how it works as well. And then number two, Steph kind of spoiled it earlier. I love a budget. Think about using those AWS budgets to kind of give yourself notifications if something gets a little bit wonky or unexpected. Set them up. Hopefully you'll never hit them, but if you do, you'll get a notification and you can kind of remedy the situation early if you have to.
Yeah, and then do you want to, would you set up a budget and cost anomaly detection at the same time?
I would set up a budget and cost anomaly detection, but if you're going to pick one of them right out of the gate and you're completely new to cloud financial management and already overwhelmed, I would say one budget first to get how that feels and what that looks like. And then after you're a little bit more comfortable with the console and a little bit more comfortable setting those things up, absolutely layer anomaly detection on top. But if we're really going 101 and trying to keep it really simple and really easy and not intimidating, budgets are super easy to wrap your brain around.
I love just like people just set them up, guys. Just do it. Just take it from us. Go now. You can leave Twitch. Go and go to your account. I'll leave you. Just pause us on YouTube and go set up a budget, because the best just stop. Because what you don't want to be is a horror story. I think that's the biggest thing with budgets, is that you want to have something there that would just let you know And if you get an alert and you made a total miscalculation, you'd set it up today, you get an alert tomorrow, you've already gone over budget, you've really misunderstood the settings. It doesn't matter, you can change it. These things aren't set in stone. These aren't budgets that you have to submit to a high level. They're not for an entire year. They're just something to help you guide. And then using that pricing calculator that Spanner mentioned earlier is how you can kind of assess that. But yeah, really, I think it's done. Just go do it. We've had an interesting question come in. Would you consider AWS Approach more of a Canadian goose flying bee, sleek and organized, or a flock of snow geese, a big flock flying high? I have no idea. I feel like this feels like the flying bee feels like something from the Mighty Duck film, and that's why I read this. But any ideas? Any feedback on this?
I would definitely go with the flying V because of the Mighty Ducks movie. That's my reference in Canadian geese.
I thought I was like, yeah, this makes sense. It's like a hockey reference, right?
So I think, like many things in the cloud, a lot is very customizable, and you can definitely choose your own adventure. I think AWS has a lot of programs, frameworks, and kind of all of the tools that we mentioned earlier to swoop you into that flying V. However, some of the responsibility is kind of with your organization as well, to make sure that you're not just doing a big mad dash and there's some kind of thought and structure behind it. So that's kind of where I'd sit.
That's a good point. We provide the services and the tools to help set the guardrails so you could end up in that nice tight flying V. But if you don't know what you're doing, and we've talked about, like developers getting in and, making mom and dad foot the bill after they've ran through the candy store, like you could just end up with the blob flying high, I suppose.
Yeah, I was talking to someone, I'm doing a summit next week, and they were talking, the organizers were talking about how, very bluntly, I think a CTO would come up and they were talking, and they said, the CTO was like, no CTO or CFO or any CIO, whatever, any of the C-suite should ever have bill shock. Like, no company should have bill shock. It should just be a thing that doesn't happen. As long as you set up all the stuff, like the two things that these guys have just said, then it does kind of set you up for success in that kind of area. So just yourself out there to get a lot of things set up at the start. Now I'm like, you guys have covered like the main things that you would do at the start, and I'm trying to think what I would add to it. The thing I'd probably say, oh, go on.
Oh no, go for it. I'm just scratching my head.
I would think maybe using organizations to the best of your ability. So Jeff kind of touched on ownership, and I think to take that a step further, and what will also help with your visibility aspects of it as well, is making sure that you don't just have maybe one giant account with everything in it. Maybe you separate them and you have a plan of how you're going to create accounts, request accounts, maybe even to have a rule, like you set up a budget with the account. Are there things that you can install in your accounts to get you started? So make sure that you have good SCPs or IAM policies. Make sure that you have instant scheduler maybe deployed from all the accounts. Block off regions that you don't want people to use. All those kind of little things that you can set early and kind of think about it before you just dive in will really kind of help you hit the ground running.
I think another thing too is it's important to recognize that migration is like a phase in your journey, and you'll likely have to structure some of your practices, whether it's cloud financial management or otherwise, based on the fact that it is a phase, and iterate on them. So if you are implementing a savings plan purchase strategy and doing a rolling migration, you're likely going to have to buy kind of tranches of savings plans throughout that to make sure that your coverage stays high. Maybe once you're all onto the cloud, you take another look at that and do a quarterly renewal or an annual renewal instead to keep it a little bit more structured. But during that time, you're kind of beholden to how fast it's coming onto the cloud, and you don't want to have to wait and kind of subscribe to a structure that's not useful to you while that's happening. So
yeah, definitely. And someone just shouted, Control Tower region to an ICP is a godsend. So
it's a good one.
Definitely check that one out. Okay, that is all from us today. Thank you so much for watching. Jeff, thanks for joining us. Next week, we were talking about automation and FinOps. So catch us here next week, and we'll see you then. Bye, guys.